The bustling terminal of Denver International Airport hummed with its usual morning chaos. Among the sea of travelers stood a distinguished-looking man in his early 50s, wearing an expensive tailored suit and a bright red MAGA hat. Despite his wealth, Mr. Chen preferred to fly commercial occasionally to stay connected with his airline's customer experience. As the CEO of Skybridge Airlines, one of the fastest-growing carriers in North America, he maintained a low profile and rarely advertised his position. Today, he was conducting one of his routine undercover checks, something he'd done quarterly since founding the airline 15 years ago. The boarding process for Flight SB-247 to San Francisco began normally. Mr. Chen stood patiently in line, observing the efficiency of the ground staff and listening to passenger conversations. A young flight attendant, Priya, was greeting passengers at the gate with a warm smile. However, her expression noticeably shifted when she spotted the red hat. "Sir, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to remove your hat before boarding," Priya stated firmly, her voice carrying a hint of practiced authority. Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Is there a specific policy about hats that I'm unaware of? We've had some complaints about politically charged clothing causing discomfort to other passengers," she explained, maintaining her professional demeanor. "It's within our discretion to ensure a comfortable environment for everyone." Several nearby passengers had stopped to watch the interaction unfold. Some nodded in agreement with Priya, while others seemed uncomfortable with the confrontation. "I understand your concern," Mr. Chen replied calmly, "but I've reviewed every line of our airline's dress code policy, and political merchandise isn't prohibited as long as it doesn't contain offensive language or graphics." Priya's confidence wavered slightly, but she stood her ground. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, I'll have to deny you boarding for this flight." The surrounding crowd grew larger, with phones discreetly recording the exchange. Mr. Chen remained remarkably composed, his voice steady and reasonable. "I respect your commitment to passenger comfort, but I believe you're overstepping your authority. Could you please show me the specific policy you're referring to?" Priya glanced nervously at her supervisor, who was now approaching the scene. The supervisor, Mrs. Patel, had worked for Skybridge for over a decade and immediately recognized Mr. Chen. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Priya," Mrs. Patel interjected softly, "a word, please?" The two stepped aside for a brief, whispered conversation. Priya's face gradually drained of color as her supervisor explained exactly who she'd been attempting to remove from the flight. The young flight attendant returned to Mr. Chen, her hands trembling slightly. I sincerely apologize, sir. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Mr. Chen smiled warmly. "No need for panic. Would you mind if we discussed this in private after the flight? I think there's an important learning opportunity here." The boarding process resumed, with passengers now whispering and speculating about what had just transpired. As Mr. Chen made his way to his seat in economy class, another part of his undercover approach, he noticed Priya's professional demeanor had been replaced by visible anxiety. Throughout the flight, Priya provided impeccable service, though her hands shook slightly whenever she passed Mr. Chen's row. He noticed her determination to maintain composure despite her obvious distress, and it impressed him. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Mr. Chen reflected on the incident. He'd witnessed similar situations at other airlines, employees letting personal biases affect their judgment, leading to unnecessary confrontations. However, he'd also seen Priya's underlying professionalism and her genuine belief that she was protecting other passengers' comfort. After landing, Mrs. Patel arranged a private meeting in the crew break room. Priya entered, expecting to be terminated on the spot. Instead, Mr. Chen offered her a seat and began with a surprising question: "What made you become a flight attendant, Priya?" Caught off guard by his gentle approach, she explained her lifelong passion for aviation and her desire to make every passenger's journey special. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke about her commitment to creating a safe, welcoming environment on board. "That's exactly why I'm not going to fire you," Mr. Chen stated, surprising both Priya and Mrs. Patel. Your instinct to protect passenger comfort is commendable. However, we need to discuss the difference between actual safety concerns and personal biases. He went on to explain how the incident would become a teaching moment for all Skybridge employees. Rather than punishment, he wanted to implement enhanced training programs about handling political differences and maintaining true neutrality in customer service. The strength of our airline lies in serving everyone equally, regardless of their political beliefs, appearance, or background, he explained. Your dedication to passenger comfort is valuable, but it needs to be applied equally and according to actual policy. Priya's relief was palpable, but more importantly, she displayed genuine understanding. The conversation evolved into a productive discussion about improving customer service protocols and addressing unconscious bias in the workplace. As Mr. Chen prepared to leave, he made one final statement: sometimes our greatest learning moments come from our biggest mistakes. I trust you'll take this experience and use it to become an even better flight attendant. The story quickly spread throughout Skybridge Airlines, though not as a tale of embarrassment, but as an example of leadership and learning. Mr. Chen's handling of the situation became a case study in the company's training materials, demonstrating how to turn a potentially volatile situation into an opportunity for growth. In the months that followed, Priya became one of the airline's most respected flight attendants, known for her ability to handle difficult situations with remarkable fairness and professionalism. She often shared her story during new hire training, emphasizing how one misguided decision led to a valuable lesson in true customer service. The incident also sparked important discussions within the airline industry about balancing personal beliefs with professional responsibilities. Mr. Chen's approach to the situation was praised by industry experts as an example of modern leadership, turning what could have been a viral nightmare into a meaningful teaching moment. The story of Mr. Chen's airline inspection continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Following the incident at Denver International Airport, he decided to extend his undercover operation to evaluate how the situation had affected crew behavior across the fleet. 2 weeks after the MAGA hat incident, he boarded another Skybridge flight, this time from Chicago to Seattle. He wore simple business casual attire, no hat, blending perfectly into the morning rush of professionals. The flight crew seemed on edge, likely because word of his surprise inspections had spread throughout the company. During the flight, he overheard 2 passengers engaged in a heated political discussion a few rows ahead. One passenger, wearing a shirt with progressive slogans, was becoming increasingly agitated with his seatmate, who held opposing views. The situation was exactly the type of scenario that had led to the Denver incident. A flight attendant named Dev approached the arguing passengers. Mr. Chen watched intently, curious to see how the crew would handle political tension after the recent training updates. Dev's approach was masterful. He didn't take sides or attempt to silence either passenger. Instead, he skillfully redirected their energy by engaging them in a conversation about their destinations and travel plans. I couldn't help but overhear you're both headed to a technology conference, Dev commented, effectively changing the subject while acknowledging both passengers. His intervention was subtle yet effective, demonstrating exactly the kind of diplomatic skill Mr. Chen hoped to see. The CEO made a note on his phone, impressed by the natural way Dev had defused the situation without infringing on anyone's rights or dignity. This was the positive change he'd hoped would emerge from the Denver incident. Later in the flight, turbulence hit unexpectedly. As the plane shuddered, Dev maintained his composure, reassuring nervous passengers with a calm demeanor that helped keep panic at bay. Mr. Chen noticed how the young flight attendant paid special attention to an elderly passenger who seemed particularly distressed, offering her water and engaging in quiet conversation until the turbulence passed. During the beverage service, Mr. Chen deliberately presented a minor challenge by requesting a specific type of tea that wasn't listed on the menu. Dev's response was diplomatic: "I apologize, sir, but we don't carry that variety. However, I can offer you several similar options that you might enjoy." The handling of the situation showed both professionalism and creative problem-solving. As the flight progressed, Mr. Chen observed more interactions between Dev and various passengers. There was a young mother struggling with a crying infant. Dev quickly arranged for her to move to a row with more space. When a businessman complained about the Wi-Fi speed, Dev explained the technical limitations patiently while offering alternative solutions. Near the end of the flight, a passenger wearing a politically charged t-shirt boards after a connection. Instead of creating an issue, Dev treated them with the same courteous professionalism he'd shown everyone else. It was exactly the kind of unbiased service Mr. Chen had emphasized in the new training protocols. During the descent into Seattle, Mr. Chen reflected on how this flight demonstrated the positive changes occurring within his airline. The Denver incident, rather than creating a culture of fear, had sparked a transformation in customer service approach. After landing, he decided to reveal his identity to Dev, pulling him aside for a conversation in the terminal. The flight attendant's eyes widened in recognition, but he maintained his professional composure. "Your handling of various situations today was exemplary," Mr. Chen commented. "Particularly the way you managed the political discussion without taking sides or suppressing anyone's views." Dev smiled modestly. "We all learned from what happened in Denver, sir. The new training helped us understand that our role isn't to police passengers' beliefs but to ensure everyone feels respected and safe while maintaining our professional boundaries." Mr. Chen nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what we hope to achieve. Tell me, how has the crew responded to the changes in protocol?" "Initially, there was some uncertainty," Dev admitted. "But we've come to realize that treating everyone with equal respect actually makes our jobs easier. We focus on service rather than getting caught up in passenger differences." The conversation continued as they walked through the terminal, discussing various scenarios and how the crew had adapted to the new approach. Dev shared insights about how the training had improved not just political situations but overall passenger interaction. "One thing that really resonated with us," Dev explained, "was learning to look for common ground rather than focusing on differences. Whether it's business travelers, families, or people with different political views, they're all our passengers deserving the same high level of service." Mr. Chen left the conversation feeling optimistic about his airline's future. The incident that could have been a public relations disaster had instead catalyzed positive change throughout the organization. It proved that with proper leadership and training, challenging situations could become opportunities for growth and improvement. As he headed to his next flight, Mr. Chen received a message that Priya, the flight attendant from Denver, had been nominated for an Internal Service Excellence Award by her peers. The transformation was real, and it was spreading throughout the company, one flight at a time. The impact of Mr. Chen's undercover operation continued to ripple through Skybridge Airlines in unexpected ways. The story had spread beyond the company, catching media attention and sparking discussions about corporate leadership in modern times. One evening, while reviewing customer feedback reports in his office, Mr. Chen received news that a popular social media post about the Denver incident had gone viral. A passenger had recorded the entire exchange and shared it online, praising the CEO's handling of the situation. The video had garnered millions of views, with comments flooding in from around the world. Business news channels picked up the story, and soon Mr. Chen found himself fielding interview requests from major networks. Rather than shy away from the attention, he saw another opportunity to demonstrate his commitment to fair business practices. During a primetime interview, the host pressed him about the political aspects of the incident. Many CEOs would have fired the flight attendant on the spot. "Why did you choose a different approach?" Mr. Chen's response was characteristically measured. "In today's world, we're quick to punish mistakes rather than learn from them. The incident wasn't about politics, it was about helping our employees understand the difference between personal beliefs and professional responsibilities." The interview resonated with viewers, particularly business leaders grappling with similar challenges in their organizations. Messages poured in from other companies asking about Skybridge's training programs and management philosophy. Meanwhile, back at the airline, the effects of the incident continued to evolve. Customer satisfaction scores had risen significantly across all routes. Flight attendants reported feeling more confident in handling difficult situations, knowing they had clear guidelines and support from management. During a routine flight from Los Angeles to Houston, a passenger approached the lead flight attendant with an unusual request. "I heard this is the airline where the CEO flies undercover," she said excitedly. "Is he on this flight?" The crew had grown accustomed to such questions. Following the viral video, passengers often tried to spot Mr. Chen among them. Some even started wearing MAGA hats, hoping to recreate the famous incident. However, the flight attendants maintained their professional approach, treating every passenger equally regardless of their attire or political leanings. The airline's booking numbers surged as the story spread. Travelers from both ends of the political spectrum chose Skybridge, impressed by the company's commitment to fairness and professional service. Industry analysts noted how a potentially damaging incident had transformed into a masterclass in crisis management and leadership. Mr. Chen used this unexpected spotlight to implement more progressive policies across the airline. He introduced a comprehensive training program called Skybridge Connect, focusing on cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution. The program became so successful that other airlines began licensing it for their own staff. During a company-wide meeting, he shared his vision for the future. "Our success isn't measured by how we treat passengers who agree with us," he explained, "but by how we treat those who don't. Every interaction is an opportunity to build bridges, not walls." The story took another interesting turn when a competing airline CEO attempted to replicate Mr. Chen's undercover approach. However, when faced with a similar situation, they reacted with immediate termination of the employee involved. The contrasting responses only served to highlight the uniqueness of Mr. Chen's leadership style. Aviation industry publications began featuring Skybridge as a case study in modern airline management. The company's approach to handling political differences became a blueprint for other service-oriented businesses. Management schools added the incident to their curriculum, analyzing how a potential crisis was transformed into a catalyst for positive change. As the months passed, Mr. Chen continued his undercover flights, though they became increasingly challenging as his face became more recognizable. He started wearing different disguises, sometimes appearing as a tourist, other times as a business traveler. Each flight provided new insights into how his company's culture was evolving. One day, while walking through Chicago O'Hare International Airport, he overheard a conversation between two Skybridge passengers. "I don't care about their politics," one said. "I fly with them because they treat everyone with respect." That simple comment validated everything Mr. Chen had worked to achieve. His airline had become known not for its political stance, but for its commitment to treating all passengers with equal dignity and respect. The story of the MAGA hat incident could have ended in Denver that day. Instead, it became a defining moment in airline history, demonstrating how principled leadership and a commitment to learning from mistakes could transform a company's culture and reputation. The aftermath of Mr. Chen's viral moment began shaping corporate culture beyond the aviation industry. 6 months after the incident, Skybridge Airlines hosted its first annual leadership summit, bringing together executives from various sectors to discuss inclusive customer service. The summit, held at the company's headquarters in Denver, attracted CEOs from retail chains, hotels, and other service-oriented businesses. They all shared a common goal: learning how to navigate an increasingly polarized society while maintaining professional standards. During his keynote speech, Mr. Chen shared previously untold details about the viral incident. The easiest path would have been to fire the employee and issue a public apology, he admitted. But easy decisions rarely lead to meaningful change. The morning sessions featured Priya herself, now promoted to lead flight attendant trainer, sharing her perspective on the incident. Her presentation, titled Learning from Mistakes, A Journey to Better Service, drew a standing ovation. That day changed not just my career, but my entire perspective on customer service, she explained to the packed auditorium. I learned that true professionalism means setting aside personal beliefs to serve everyone equally. Between sessions, attendees participated in workshops simulating challenging customer service scenarios. The exercises, developed from real situations Skybridge crews had encountered, helped participants understand the delicate balance between maintaining order and respecting individual rights. During lunch, Mr. Chen sat with a group of retail executives who shared their own challenges. A department store CEO described losing customers due to politically charged display decisions. A restaurant chain owner talked about staff struggling with customers wearing controversial messaging. The key, Mr. Chen explained, is creating clear, fair policies that apply equally to everyone. When rules are consistent and justified by business necessity rather than personal preference, they're much easier to enforce. The summit also addressed the role of social media in modern business crisis management. Communications experts analyzed how Skybridge's transparent handling of the incident had turned a potential PR disaster into a marketing advantage. A tech startup founder approached Mr. Chen during an afternoon break. "We're developing an AI-powered customer service training program," she explained. "Would you consider sharing your experiences to help shape our algorithms?" The request sparked an interesting discussion about maintaining human judgment in an increasingly automated world. Mr. Chen emphasized that while technology could help train staff, the human element in customer service remained irreplaceable. Later that day, a panel discussion featuring Dev, the flight attendant from the Seattle flight, highlighted how Skybridge's improved training had transformed daily operations. "We no longer fear difficult situations," Dev explained. "Instead, we see them as opportunities to demonstrate our commitment to fair service." The summit's success led to the creation of an industry working group focused on developing standards for handling politically charged situations in customer service environments. Mr. Chen was unanimously chosen to lead the initiative. During the closing ceremony, Mr. Chen made an unexpected announcement. Skybridge would be launching a scholarship program for students interested in studying corporate ethics and inclusive business practices. The program would prioritize candidates from diverse backgrounds and perspectives. "The future of business lies not in avoiding difficult conversations," he declared, "but in creating environments where different viewpoints can coexist professionally." As the summit concluded, attendees left with practical strategies and a new perspective on modern business leadership. The event had transformed a single incident into a movement for positive change in customer service across industries. The following week, Harvard Business Review published an in-depth analysis of the MAGA hat incident and its ripple effects throughout the business world. The article praised Mr. Chen's approach as a model for modern crisis management and corporate leadership. Back at Skybridge, the company continued its upward trajectory. Employee satisfaction scores reached record highs, and customer loyalty programs saw unprecedented growth. The airline had become known not just for its service, but for its role in shaping a more inclusive business environment. 1 year after the MAGA hat incident, Skybridge Airlines faced an unexpected challenge. During a shareholders' meeting, an investor group questioned whether the company's inclusive approach was affecting profitability. Mr. Chen's response would once again demonstrate his unique leadership style. The quarterly shareholders' meeting was held in a packed conference room at Skybridge headquarters. The atmosphere was tense as the lead investor, a veteran of the airline industry, stood up to speak. "While we appreciate the positive press, our concern is that political neutrality might be costing us valuable market segments," the investor stated. "Other airlines are capitalizing on political alignment. Should we consider a similar strategy?" Mr. Chen rose slowly from his seat, taking a moment to survey the room. The silence was palpable as shareholders waited for his response. Instead of immediately defending his position, he walked to the presentation screen and pulled up the company's financial data. "Let's look at the numbers," he began, his voice steady and confident. "Since implementing our inclusive service policy, our customer retention rate has increased by 32%. Our market share has grown in both conservative and liberal-leaning regions. Most importantly, our profit margins have exceeded industry averages by 18%. He clicked through slides showing detailed analytics. Customer surveys revealed that travelers from across the political spectrum chose Skybridge specifically because they felt respected, regardless of their views. The data painted a clear picture of success. "But there's something more valuable than these numbers," Mr. Chen continued. "We've created a sustainable business model that doesn't depend on political wins. While our competitors chase temporary advantages by appealing to one side or another, we're building long-term loyalty based on service quality." The room buzzed with discussion as shareholders processed the information. A younger investor raised her hand. "But what about the costs of your enhanced training programs and inclusive policies?" Mr. Chen nodded, acknowledging the valid question. He pulled up another slide showing training costs compared to reduced incident rates and improved customer satisfaction scores. The numbers clearly demonstrated that investment in training had more than paid for itself through decreased complaints, higher booking rates, and reduced staff turnover. "Consider this," he added. "While other airlines spend millions on damage control after political controversies, we've turned our approach into a competitive advantage. Our training program is now licensed to other companies, creating a new revenue stream." The meeting took an interesting turn when a flight attendant was invited to share real-world examples. She described how their inclusive approach had prevented several potential incidents, earning praise from passengers who witnessed the professional handling of delicate situations. As the discussion continued, Mr. Chen revealed plans for expanding the company's inclusive business model. Skybridge would be launching new routes specifically chosen to serve diverse communities often overlooked by major carriers. "Our success isn't just about avoiding controversy," he explained. "It's about recognizing that good business transcends political divisions. When we focus on service excellence rather than political alignment, we attract customers from all backgrounds." The shareholders' concerns gradually transformed into enthusiasm as they understood the long-term vision. The meeting concluded with strong support for continuing and expanding the company's inclusive policies. Following the meeting, several major investment firms increased their stakes in Skybridge, citing the company's innovative approach to modern business challenges. Industry analysts began referring to the Skybridge model as a blueprint for sustainable growth in politically divided markets. Mr. Chen's stance had once again proved that principled leadership could align with business success. As he left the meeting, he received news that Skybridge had been nominated for several industry awards, including Most Innovative Airline and Best Corporate Culture. The shareholder meeting became another chapter in the ongoing story of how one incident with a MAGA hat had transformed not just an airline, but the broader conversation about business in modern society. It showed that standing firm on principles of inclusivity and respect could lead to both moral and financial success. 18 months after the MAGA hat incident, Skybridge Airlines received an unexpected invitation. The World Economic Forum wanted Mr. Chen to speak about transforming corporate culture in polarized times. However, a new challenge emerged just days before his scheduled appearance. A major winter storm had grounded flights across the country. Thousands of travelers were stranded, and airlines faced mounting criticism over their handling of the crisis. While other carriers blamed weather conditions and limited resources, Mr. Chen saw an opportunity to put Skybridge's values into action. Instead of canceling his forum appearance, he decided to conduct it virtually while working alongside his stranded passengers. Dressed in his usual business attire, he helped at various airport counters, assisting frustrated travelers regardless of which airline they were booked with. A news crew captured him helping an elderly couple rebook their cancelled flight on a competing airline. When asked why he'd recommend a competitor, his response was simple: in times of crisis, we're not competitors. We're all responsible for getting people home safely. The storm continued for 3 days. Mr. Chen remained at Denver International Airport, turning it into an impromptu command center. He authorized hotel vouchers not just for Skybridge passengers, but for any stranded traveler who needed assistance. The company's customer service team worked round the clock, coordinating with other airlines to maximize available seats. During this crisis, a remarkable scene unfolded in Terminal B. Passengers wearing various political merchandise, from MAGA hats to progressive slogans, worked together to help families with young children find comfortable spots to rest. The spirit of cooperation that Mr. Chen had fostered in his airline had somehow spread to the stranded passengers themselves. His World Economic Forum speech, delivered via video link from a crowded airport terminal, became one of the event's most talked about sessions. Leadership isn't about managing things when they're easy, he said, as announcements about delayed flights echoed in the background. It's about maintaining your principles when everything around you is chaos. The speech was frequently interrupted by passengers approaching him for help, and rather than apologize for the disruptions, he incorporated each interaction into his presentation. The world's business leaders watched in real time as his inclusive management philosophy played out in a crisis situation. A particularly powerful moment came when a passenger wearing a MAGA hat helped a woman in a progressive t-shirt with her heavy luggage. The camera caught Mr. Chen's smile as he pointed out the scene to his virtual audience. This is what happens when we focus on our common humanity rather than our differences, he observed. Throughout the storm crisis, Skybridge's share price actually rose, defying the industry trend during weather disruptions. Market analysts noted that the company's handling of the situation had strengthened its brand value beyond conventional metrics. After the storm cleared, letters of appreciation poured in from passengers of various airlines. Many noted how the experience had changed their perspective on corporate responsibility and human cooperation in times of crisis. The incident added another dimension to the ongoing story of Skybridge's transformation. What had begun with a confrontation over a MAGA hat had evolved into a movement that could bring people together even in the most challenging circumstances. Business schools rushed to update their case studies on Skybridge, now incorporating the storm crisis response as another example of how principled leadership could transform potential disasters into opportunities for positive change. Mr. Chen later reflected that the storm crisis had proven something crucial. The inclusive culture they'd built wasn't just a fair weather policy, it was a robust framework that showed its true value during times of stress and challenge. 2 years after the MAGA hat incident, Skybridge Airlines achieved something unprecedented in the aviation industry. The company was simultaneously ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction, employee happiness, and shareholder returns. However, success brought new challenges. Trade publications began speculating that Mr. Chen would retire, triggering concerns about the company's future. During a busy Monday morning flight from Boston to San Francisco, he decided to address these rumors in his characteristic style, by going undercover once again. This time, he posed as a middle-aged economics professor, complete with reading glasses and a tweed jacket. The flight was particularly challenging, with a mix of delayed passengers, technical issues, and weather concerns. Perfect conditions to test if the company's culture could survive without him. As passengers boarded, he witnessed something remarkable. The crew handled a series of difficult situations with the same balanced approach he'd championed. When the flight was delayed due to mechanical issues, the lead flight attendant provided updates with transparent honesty, something that had become a Skybridge trademark. During the delay, a heated argument erupted between passengers over a recent political controversy. The crew's response demonstrated how deeply ingrained the company's values had become. They didn't shut down the discussion or take sides. Instead, they created an environment where passionate disagreement could coexist with mutual respect. A junior flight attendant approached the arguing passengers with complimentary drinks and snacks, saying, "While we Work on the mechanical issue, perhaps we could all share our travel stories? The simple intervention diffused tensions without diminishing either side's dignity. Mid-flight, Mr. Chen requested a meeting with the captain to discuss the industry's future, maintaining his professor persona. The captain's responses revealed how thoroughly the company's philosophy had permeated every level of operations. Mr. Chen has built something bigger than himself, the captain explained, unaware of his passenger's true identity. It's not about one person's leadership anymore, it's about a way of doing business that just makes sense. The conversation was interrupted by turbulence, during which the crew demonstrated perfect coordination and communication. Each team member knew exactly what to do, showing that the company's success wasn't dependent on constant oversight. As the flight progressed, Mr. Chen observed countless small interactions that proved his principles had become self-sustaining. From the way the crew handled a passenger's medical issue to their response to a complaint about seat assignments, every action reflected the balance of efficiency and empathy he'd worked to instill. Before landing, he witnessed a scene that convinced him the time for transition had come. A young crew member was training a new hire, explaining the company's philosophy: "We're not here to judge people's beliefs, we're here to show that different viewpoints can coexist at 35,000 feet. The next day, Mr. Chen called a surprise board meeting. Instead of announcing his retirement, he proposed a unique succession plan. Leadership would be distributed across a diverse council of employees from various levels of the company, ensuring that no single person could alter the inclusive culture they'd built. The true test of leadership, he told the board, isn't how the company performs while you're at the helm. It's whether the values you've instilled can outlive your tenure. The proposal was revolutionary for the industry, but the board had learned to trust his unconventional wisdom. They approved the plan, and Skybridge began preparing for a new chapter in its history. As the story concluded, Mr. Chen's revolutionary succession plan transformed into reality. The newly formed Leadership Council, consisting of 15 members from various departments, took control of Skybridge's daily operations. Their first challenge arrived unexpectedly: a competitor attempted a hostile takeover. The rival airline, attracted by Skybridge's success, made an aggressive bid to purchase controlling shares. They promised higher profits through streamlined operations, code for abandoning the inclusive policies that had defined the airline. The Leadership Council faced this challenge by staying true to their founding principles. During a crucial shareholders' meeting, they presented evidence of how Skybridge's unique culture had created sustainable competitive advantages that couldn't be replicated through traditional management. Council member Priya, now Chief of Customer Experience, shared data showing how their approach had reduced operating costs by decreasing passenger conflicts, employee turnover, and legal disputes. Dev, heading training and development, demonstrated how their inclusive policies had created industry-leading customer loyalty rates. The takeover attempt ultimately failed when major institutional investors backed the council's vision. One prominent investor stated, "Skybridge isn't just an airline, it's a blueprint for modern business success." Mr. Chen watched these developments from his new role as chairman emeritus. During a final undercover flight, he witnessed something remarkable: a passenger complimenting a flight attendant on handling a political disagreement, saying, "This would have never happened on another airline." The crew member's response captured everything he'd hoped to achieve: "At Skybridge, we believe that treating everyone with respect isn't just good service, it's good business." 3 years after the MAGA hat incident, Skybridge's story had become a Harvard Business School case study. Students analyzed how a potential crisis transformed into a movement that changed corporate culture across industries. The airline's success proved that principled leadership could create lasting change. Skybridge's model demonstrated that embracing diversity and treating all customers with equal respect wasn't just morally right, it was profitable. As Mr. Chen finally retired completely, he left behind more than just a successful airline. He'd created a legacy showing that in a divided world, businesses could thrive by building bridges rather than choosing sides. The MAGA hat still hung in Skybridge's headquarters museum, not as a symbol of division, but as a reminder that the greatest opportunities for growth often come disguised as challenges. It stood as testimony to how one incident, handled with wisdom and foresight, could transform an entire industry's approach to customer service and corporate leadership.